Good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the next to final session entitled Popular and Official Attitudes in the Gulf States Towards the Palestinian Question. The first presentation will be presented by Nasser bin Saif Al Saadi, Associate Professor in the UNESCO Chair in Nazwa University. He holds a PhD in History from Sultan bin Qaboos University, and Saif bin Adi Al-Maskari. He holds a master degree in contemporary history from Sultan Qaboos University. They are going to present a presentation entitled Omani Approach to the Palestinian Questions from the Nakba to Camp David at the official and popular as well as the opposition's 20 minutes for your presentations. Please, the floor is yours.
Bismillah wassalat.
In the name of Allah and peace be upon His noble messenger, my presentation will highlight the Omani approach to the Palestinian questions from the Nakba and the period prior to Nakba, the British occupation and their assistance to the Zionist movement to the Camp David approximately to 1980. The first one is the popular attitude because they were precedents in comes to act to support the Palestinian cause through their participation, their donations through the second attitude is the official attitude. So prior to 1959 it could be divided into two parts because of the civil crisis that Oman has witnessed. Then the appointment of Sultan bin Said as the Sultan of Oman, and after the 1970 that was reflected in the presence of the Palestinian question in the Omani context. The third part is the opposition and their attitude and their position towards the Palestinian questions, especially those related to the left. So the linkage between Oman to the Palestinian cause are governed by different contexts. That goes back to the beginning of the early years of the 20th century and the context of the so prior to the Palestinian cause, there were a movement in Oman and announced Salam bin Rashid as the Imam or the religious leader of Oman. And among the objectives of this imama was to put a stop to the objectives of the foreign countries' domination to the area. Also, go back to what has been published in Ashura newspaper on the 24th of December 1925. As you can see on the screen, the Omani people stood against the foreign presence and the relations with the leadership of Oman. The the people appointed an imam as their leader. The the British domination on the area and was which interfered in the affairs of Oman. It was not surprising that one of the Omani people published this article in the Al-Shabaab and he said that I do not see any. It's not surprising to see how the British people treat our brethren in Palestine because we have endured these activities. Hawthorne Hall, he was the first secretary of the government, the first secretary in the government of Palestine, and he was dubbed as the defender of colonization in the area. Also, with the advances in Oman, the Palestinians were very involved in the educational process in Oman that goes far and Ashura in an article that was published in 1927 that the government of Muscat has requested the principal of one of the schools in Palestine to come to Oman to manage and lead the educational process. And you can see this is a list of the Palestinians who have worked in Oman in the education sector. The development that Palestine have witnessed since 1917 have impacted the attitudes and the roles and the positions of Muslims and Arabs throughout. And we have heard about the movements in India and Indonesia and different parts of the world. And in a letter that was sent by 50 prominent figures in Oman, they expressed their denunciation of the decision by the government of His Majesty in Palestine by granting a homeland to the Jews in Palestine. We know that many Arab countries were under the colonization rules. However, the people in these countries were very active, and Omanis were no less. They were part of this popular action. And this is a list of the donations during the 1936 revolutions. So these are the names of people who have contributed to the Palestinian question, the Palestinian cause, and even during the Nakba, the catastrophe in 1948. This is a list of the movement of Omani people in support to the Palestinian cause. This is a list of the people who donated to this Palestinian question: men, women, children, and expats who were very instrumental in supporting the Palestinian cause. Also, the participation in the struggle inside Palestine. So we have two experiences that should be highlighted. The first one is during the Nakba, where a number of youth in Oman, there were 9 youth who entered the Palestinian territory through the Egyptian borders, and Ali bin Nasser was a martyr. And Al-Hijri was not a martyr. Actually, he was he took part in the armed struggle in Palestine, and he returned to Oman, and he published his story. And also, the second experience was in the 1980s when two young Omanis went to Palestine to take part in the armed struggle. Adnan bin Amir al-Shawli, they left a letter seeking forgiveness from their parents that they're gonna so they reached southern Lebanon, and they joined the Fatah movement, liberation movement, and they stayed there for around 1 year. Al Ali continued his education, and he died in February 1st, 2011. This is a photo of the two Omani youth taking part in the training in the Ashuf area. There are many poets in the Omani that highlighted the presence of the Palestinian question and the cause throughout the history, and starting from the early 20s of the. So these are verses of poems by Saleh bin Ali, and I remember when I was in the secondary school, we were taught a poem that talks about the struggle of Palestinian people against the Jews and mainly speaking about the importance of unity and to be steadfast against the Jewish army and asking Arabs to unify around this very noble cause. Also, now I'll move to talk about the authorities and the official attitudes and position. So the official position until 1970 was lukewarm and was affected by the political situation inside and outside the Sultanate of Oman. And as we remember, prior to 1970, there were two governing entities. This division in the authorities had impacted, negatively impacted the Omani position towards the Palestinian cause and other causes in the Arab and the region. So prior to 1970, as I said, the position was lukewarm, and however, post Said bin Taymur, the Sultan of Oman, then expressed uh, moderate views, and the only notable position was the statement by His Majesty Sultan in 1939, where the correspondents of that newspaper published the position of the late Sultan and described that the statement as a very enthusiastic and said that the statement expresses the willingness by the Sultan to support the noble causes. However, after 1970, the awareness about the Palestinian causes has transformed immensely, and the changes, transformations shows that efforts were taken and a legislation was enacted after 1970 calling for a boycott of Israel. And after 1973, the government asked public officials to donate 1 month's salary in support of the war of 1973, and a letter was sent by Sultan Qaboos to both President Anwar Sadat and Hafez al-Assad. The official positions and attitudes continued through the diplomatic channels as well as other conduits. And as we remember that Sultanate Oman did not denounce the visit of Anwar Sadat to Al-Quds and meet the Israeli officials in 1977. Also, the position of the Sultanate of Oman concerning the Camp David Accord was not entirely negative, and Oman did not join the countries who have boycotted Egypt after signing the Camp David Accord. And these are some of the statements that you can see on the screen, statements by Omani officials, starting from the head of the government. Now we'll come to the third strand, which is the opposition, the Omani opposition. The 1960s of the past century were full of positions by the oppositions, especially the left in Oman, towards the Palestinian cause. They adopted position anti-colonialism, and this led the oppositions and the descendant Omani to take more take part in the causes, the liberation causes throughout the world, especially in Palestine. The the Imam authorities linked its struggle to all those who are associated with the colonization power of UK, and that was evident in the meetings of the League of Arab States. The Imam called to follow suit the revolution in Algeria, which would lead to the liberation of Palestine. and in the literature there were evidence of that. And the Palestinian catastrophe then was evident, and the role of UK was instrumental in handing in Palestine to the Jewish authorities. The left and the pan-Arab, the nationalist movement, were very much involved in this cause. And we remember the Arab nationalists and the Ba'ath party and the Nasri's movement were very much instrumental in feeding in the support to the Palestinian question. Documents and publications and literature shows the linkage between the shared enemies that requires confronting imperialism, Zionist, and the retraction movement in the Arab world. Among the main outcomes of Himreen conference was the support of the Palestinian people through the armed struggles and supporting the legitimate struggle against imperialism and colonialism. The common goal of all these components are evident in the statement of the National Front for the Liberation of Oman, who took part in the conference when he said that our cause should focus on destroying the Jewish regimes and all those who are supported. And in the also Mr. Azin al-Qalaq, the representative of the PLO, who underscored the link between the liberation movement in Palestine with the liberation movement in Oman. And both liberation movements adopted the same approach. And one of the magazines that published by the Omani oppositions have, and the 10th George Habash, the leader of the popular liberation movement in Palestine, who calls for support and support, money support as well as armed support. And Ahmed Jibril, one of the leaders, and Abu Saleh said that both fronts are fronts of struggle against a common enemy. Also, a conference was held where it was affirmed the importance of the support of the Palestinian people and the attitude toward the development of the Palestinian question, starting from the Nakba until the signing of the Camp David Accords. Literatures showed that the Omani people at the official and the popular levels are very keen to support to the liberation movement. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Oman has issued a statement that calls upon all Arab citizens to take a firm position against the Camp David. Finally, we'll speak about the visit of the late Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt, to Tel Aviv, and what follows the popular front to of the repression of Oman, took a firm position concerning the dissolvement of the Palestinian cause that would lead to killing the Palestinian cause. And thank you very much. These are a list of slogans that showed support to the Palestinian cause. Thank you very much, Mr. Saif and Mr. Nasser. And speaking about the common enemy and the common experience in fighting the Zionist movement and the important role of educators, Palestinians in the educational process in both Oman and Kuwait. Now we'll move to the second presentation that will be delivered by Riham Amro. She's going to talk about the Kuwaitis and the cause, reading into the transformations of Kuwaiti political awareness of the Palestinian question. I would like to thank Dr. Ibtihal Al-Khatib and apologies to the experts and the academy. I will start with dislogging the title of this paper. There is a modification. Kuwaitis and cause, a reading into the transformation of Kuwaiti political awareness of between 1929 to 1960. And I wrote Kuwaitis. Kuwaitis, and I didn't mention that Kuwait has a political authority, but rather I focused on individuals and groups who were very instrumental in the Palestinian cause. So I said a cause, not the cause, because this makes the presentations covers Algeria, Iraq, and other countries. So this paper is not a thorough investigation and reading of the Palestinian cause. I used transformations, not developments, because these phases were not according to chronological order, but rather they were transformational. And as the political awareness, it's not awareness, not consciousness, and it is imported term from the Western theories. The specificities, the historical and cultural specificity to the area requires selecting the proper terms. The Palestinian cause is it is a known cause. I started my prayer from the period prior to Al-Nakba to the 70s, although I believe that history cannot be divided into chronological periods because when it is a quantum, sorry, in my presentation, I would like to follow these transformations. I'll try to analyze it in cultural and social context by focusing on the three strands. The first one, the terminologies, what is the political awareness and how we can reflect this awareness through the different media outlets. Also, the factors behind this political awareness, and the third, the changes and transformations. I'll be selective in political awareness is the awareness of an individual or a group about their political and economic situation and context, and this requires understanding the issues related to this very main cause and identify the influential parties and the decision-making process. This awareness could be individually or collectively and reflects the awareness of the people concerning their common objectives and their behaviors and their aspirations that could take different manifestations through sit-ins, demonstrations, activities, and Kuwait has seen all these manifestations throughout this period. So the term the political awareness, John Zeller, it is not the political framework to understand this political behavior and its impact on the historical and economic process. It was not clearly used in the Arab context, especially the Gulf context. It was mentioned as a term in different studies, like Dr. Armehi in the fourth chapter. He used this political awareness when he spoke about the Bahraini context. However, he did not fully advance this term. As for the importance of this term, there is a mix-up in studies that focuses on the historical aspect. It is a bit problematic because democracy is a system that is adopted by the government to, and it is a principle that is granted by the governing authorities to the people. However, the political awareness is different somehow because the it emanates from the people, not from the authority, and result as the presence of the political awareness. So those who have political awareness, they will struggle and strive to accomplish and realize their aspirations, unlike democracy. Concerning the second theory, that it is not a theory, but rather establishing a framework by Anderson when it comes to the imaginative groups, when he said that the local journalism are among the most cultural activities that enhance the loyalties to this imaginative group. And he spoke about the impact of language in developing this political awareness and the support to the Palestinian cause. It will reflect the so some of the magazines were Kuwaiti, Al-Kadhima, Al-Iman, Al-Ba'tha, Al-Yaqadha, and others are Arabs like Palestine الدفاع, Al-Arabi, Al-Ittihad, Wal-Jihad, Wal-Kifah, and Al-Kifah. As for the factors, the political awareness has been affected by a number of complex factors, internally and externally, some related to education, and some says that oil was a factor. However, try to refrain from this dichotomy, the oil and the Western interest, the Western presence in Al Kuwait. So I tried to look for other factors that could have played a role in the transformation of the political awareness. So the geopolitical situation and the pressures from different countries like Iraq and Saudi Arabia has or have impacted the transformations of the political awareness in Kuwait, because Kuwait was under a constant threat even before the 60s. So it was a motivation that there is a threat and could constitute as an incentive to enhance the political awareness and to agree on a national constitutions and establish parliamentarian process in Kuwait. Concerning Saudi Arabia, go back to 1938, concerning the council movement, when the traders and the merchants were under a lot of pressure because Saudi Arabia was under a siege, and the reason was of an economic factor. The presence of UK and the liberation movements in Africa also, the impacts of these liberation movements in Africa and their influence on the political awareness in Kuwait. So these factors motivated individuals and the group to enhance their awareness, and also called for because we know the relations between Kuwait and Iraq, and the media, radio, the publications, magazines, and newspapers encourage the Kuwaiti people to adopt more advanced positions.
Some were written by Kuwaitis. Also, to complete this picture, a number of bookshops were established, like an example, Muhammad al-Bagati in 1938 established the National Library or Bookshop, and they also printed books, and they printed uh, printed notebooks for schools carrying slogans of pan-Arabism and Arab nationalism. The clubs, the cultural clubs, also were meeting places for students, teachers, and government employees, which contributed to the awareness of the population, which was not confined to the geography of Kuwait, but went beyond that. Bahrain also had an impact on the people of Kuwait, like newspapers. The educated class exchanged this kind of influences. An example, which is an anecdote, for example, the influence of radio stations. Uh, Captain Tijori, the British resident in Kuwait, ordered that radios should not be broadcasting certain hours of the day to curtail the ability of the population to listen to Berlin radio, and therefore have an influence on people's political awareness. After World War II, before I delve into more details, readers can notice that the level of awareness amongst these individuals and groups, I may have used the word to magnify, but by that I mean enlargement rather. And there were some students who were students in the 40s, but later on became professionals, and they used these clubs and facilities to spread awareness. When they were students, they had a role to play in the protest movements in the 40s. In the 50s, they became owners of these clubs, and they founded political parties, and later on, some of them became members of the parliament. So the same students who were students, then professionals, then club owners, then parliamentarians. So of course, we know, we are all familiar with the role of the traders class. These students were the sons of these traders. They paid attention to these cultural aspects of life, and this development was gradual, and it stayed with the students until they became members of parliament. There were some students who were educated in neighboring countries like Lebanon and Iraq, and they also were influenced by that, and they ended up influencing their communities. Also, some of the educated class talked about the Iraqi revolution against the British in 1920 revolt, the Saad Zaghlul revolution in Egypt, the Syrian people's revolution against the French colonialization, and the Palestinian revolution of 1936. But in fact, in 1929, one of the poems by Khalid al-Faraj, who was amongst the first who write about the Palestinian cause, he has a poem which was famous in 1929. And as for the class of the students and the educated in Qatar, this group had their impact on local and regional issues, and they, for example, wrote about the rights of the Palestinian people and solidarity with the Palestinian people and their rights, and which later on were described as pan-Arabist sentiments, and they also took part in some activities like donations, um, organizing money collection, sending arms to Palestine. Jassim al-Sagr is a well-known uh, trader, and he, in an interview, said that some Kuwaiti traders smuggled weapons to on camelback to Al Basra, then Iraq, and then Al Kamal, and Syria, and then to Palestine to contribute to the 1936 revolution. I try and give as many examples as I can. I tried as much as possible to gain information from the British documents. There was a mention that the nationalist sentiments in Kuwait was attributed largely to Palestinian teachers, and the movement of the Red Book, like Abdullah al-Sagir, also the son of a famous family, a prominent family, and they played a role in political activism. Abdul Latif al-Ghanim, Khalid al-Adesani, they were part of the nationalist bloc, and they were standing against the ruler at that time. As for the partition of Palestine, the Al-Difa' newspaper talks about a demonstration against the partition in 1947, and also the establishment of the pan-Arabist or Arab nationalist movement, and this was one of the most important developments because this movement tried to also spread awareness amongst the youth in favor of the Palestinian cause and other pan-nationalist Arab causes. Also, the nationalist cultural club was established and made a significant contribution. Finally, it's clear that Kuwait was amongst the early Gulf countries which is linked to the Palestinian cause, and this was from before the Nakba of 1948, and this continued despite the ordeals the country has gone through, like the Iraqi invasion and others. The people continued manifesting their feelings in criticisms shown to oil companies and people with a nationalist conscience rejected the presence of foreign companies. But despite that, of course, the oil revenues, which have provided Kuwait with economic stability and welfare systems, and this, of course, negatively have impacted the people's attitudes, and instead of political confrontation, they preferred economic security. Thank you, Dr. Riham. It's important to talk about the question of awareness and not democratic feelings. There is important mention you made that the Iraqi threat to Kuwait led to the establishment of parliament and the constitution, and also the Iraqi invasion led to the resumption of parliamentary life in Kuwait also. Now we move to Ms. Yara Nassar. She is a coordinator of Arab Studies in the Arab Center. She holds a master's degree in international relations from Doha Institute for Graduate Studies, and today she will be talking about the forgotten chapters. Good afternoon, and thank you. The title is Forgotten Chapters of Palestinian Liberation Movements in Their Gulf Cradle. Riham has focused on the level of awareness amongst the people of Kuwait vis-à-vis the Palestinian question. Now try to reverse this angle and talk about the establishment of Palestinian political activism in the Gulf, focusing on Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, and the Fatah movement, the Palestinian National Movement. Studies which considered the establishment of Fatah by and large ignored the establishment of Fatah in the Gulf area, and in fact it happened in Kuwait with Yasser Arafat and Khalil al-Wazir. In total, there were 5 people. Also, the Gulf countries have provided a lot of support to the Palestinian cause. Uh, I think the role of the Gulf area, both governmental and at governmental and popular levels, I'll try and allude to that. There are 2 essential questions in my estimate when it comes to linking the Palestinian question to the Gulf people. Since 1948, there is a Palestinian diaspora in the Gulf, and also before that there was the educational missions in 1928 in Oman, and the 30s in Kuwait, and the Palestinian teachers who came to the Barkia school, and the Palestinians contributed to many aspects of life. They established important institutions, whether in health or education or other aspects of life. And of course, there is the aspect of aid provided by Gulf countries to Palestine. And there is finally the question of normalization. I'll try to focus on the establishment of the Palestinian national movement Palestinian studies in the Gulf focused on the macro level, the external elements, and Rosemary Saeed Zahlan's book, Palestine and Gulf Countries. This was published in English, but then translated into Arabic and published in Arabic, with focuses on the external elements, and especially the American role. The second type of studies are the studies on the Palestinian diaspora, like Shafiq al-Ghabra's book and Bilal al-Hassan's book, which focused on the schools of the PLO in Kuwait and others. There are other books which focused on donations and financial support, like Khalid Yusuf Shatti's book, and he comes up with lots of statistics and tables on the size of the donations in that period onwards. And due to the lack of secondary sources on this, I had to resort on the primary sources, and like the memoirs of the personalities who were like Salim Zanun, Khalim Zan, Salah Khalaf, Mahmoud Abbas, Khalid Benjamin, Saeed al-Mishal, Salam al-Sharafa, Muhammad Ali, Kamal Udwan. These are examples of pioneers. They either wrote their own biographies, autobiographies, or authorized biographies, and and it's important to remember how they came to the Gulf. That in its own is not different. They applied to visas from the Gulf missions in Syria and Egypt to attract talented people to come and work, like Salah Khalaf, who came to Kuwait after he met a mission to recruit teachers, Salim Zanu, Sulaiman al-Sharafa, who came in 1957 after being interviewed by a Qatari company in Cairo, and Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen, who came through a mission which went to Damascus. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the dynamics of that. Of course, there are others who went to other areas before coming to the Gulf, but in the first phase, they mainly came directly to the Gulf. There are three phases here from 1956 to 1958. This is this was the period of preparation, and there are contradictory accounts of that. There are more than 11 accounts on the establishment of Fatah as a movement. Amongst these narratives or accounts, some attribute this establishment of the movement to Qatar and Saudi. Also, even Hamas's establishment and other movements is also disputed, and some attributed to Kuwait, some to other areas. The second phase is from 1958 to 1964, which was the period of different meetings between different groups. And Salah Khalaf, in his memoirs, he talks about Kuwait specifically, and he says that they managed to unify more than 35 to 40 different groups. Some of them were of only few in their membership, but the compilation of this together unified efforts and consolidated the ranks. But the important thing was these groups in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. The third phase from 1964 to 1967 which included the announcement of the establishment of the Palestine Liberation Organization, and this expedited Fatah's move towards armed struggle on the 1st of January 1965, which started by the movement's presence in Kuwait. Then they moved after that to Syria, and when Yasser Arafat and Khalil Wazir led the movement there, but the military action encouraged people to join the ranks of Fatah and the recruitment. Shafiq al-Ghabra tells the story in detail of how he joined this movement, which was in 1968 or thereabouts. I mentioned the question of establishing the PLO as a factor in expediting Fatah's move to armed struggle, and Khairi Abu Jbain's book, which is of 600 pages, he wrote about this, and the book is full of details about political life in Kuwait at that time, details like before the period, before the establishment of the PLO, and Ahmad al-Shuqairi's tours of the region, and the elections amongst Palestinians who used to work for government offices under the full response of the governments at that time, and they were provided with facilities, financial sources, and others. This question can sound rather strange. Why the Palestinian political activism was born and bred in the Gulf, not in other locations? I think due to the large numbers, there were some 500,000 Palestinians, mostly educated people who were residing in the Gulf, and the Gulf was relatively far away from the immediate vicinity of Israel and the activity of the Israeli intelligence services, and also the political climate allowed Fatah to move. In Qatar, the Fatah movement noticed that most of their membership worked for the Ministry of Education, but they tried to widen the scope of recruitment. But this was in the early days, the movement was still underground, and they relied on personal contacts for recruiting new members. Of course, in the Gulf, they were here to work, and they had contracts, and the times of leave were organized, and they had to take that into consideration until the time came when some people were seconded to political activity. The others who were being paid covered the expenses of these people who gave up their jobs to focus only on their political duties. Some anecdotes here are worth mentioning, that if there was if there was a meeting to be prepared between the Qatari branch and the Saudi branch, they used to go to a certain meeting point in the desert, and they used to pretend that these are done purely accidentally and by coincidence. So groups like geologists or people who work for the oil companies travel as if they are on official duty, and they accidentally meet with another group in the desert to avoid the suspicions of the authorities. And the meetings were done cautiously. They used to have certain codes and signs to recognize each other. Saeed al-Mishal in his memoirs tells the story that on one occasion he was going to the Qatari-Saudi border to meet with a counterpart, and he used to know the customs officer. He doesn't mention the name, but he says that when Al-Mishal reached the border crossing, and so the customs officer vacated his office and he brought them tea and coffee to hold the meeting. Al- Although the establishment of a political organization required some secrecy, but all these people agree on one thing: they were never harassed by the authorities, they were allowed more or less freedom to move, although most of them were not known. Ali Khalifa al Kuwar, in his memoirs, mentions the names of some Palestinians like Rafiq and Nasta, Mahmoud Abbas, Muhammad Yusuf al Najjar, and others, and he says that they were part of the Fatah group, but they worked in secret underground, and their political affiliations were not known. Also, Salah Khalaf says that when there was a suggestion of imposing some sort of a liberation tax, Sheikh Khalifa, the ruler, approved that, and the members of the movement used to. Kamal Naji was an Egyptian national who was naturalized later, used to cover for them with the knowledge of the minister concerned, who is from the Al Thani family, Sheikh Jassim Al Thani. And Mahmoud Abbas said that Sheikh Jassim provided us with the cover we need. This is an ex and quotation from Mahmoud Abbas's memoirs, said that the British used to have control over the security aspects, but Sheikh Jassim used to help us and he gave us some financial donations and sometimes provided us with walkie talkies and wireless equipment. Suleiman al-Shurafa in this context says the Qatar branch enjoyed the support of the Qatari people, and the members of the group used to coordinate with the officials in Qatar to make sure that whatever they do focuses on the Palestinian issue and has nothing to do with any internal affairs of Qatar. At the time of the 1967 Seven-Day War, they gathered 100 fighters with the full knowledge of the Qatar authorities, and Sheikh Abdullah Al Atiyah, the commander of the Qatari Armed Forces, donated military uniforms, and Sheikh Ahmed bin Ali Al Thani and his deputy Sheikh Ahmed bin Ali Al Thani and the Minister of Education Sheikh Jassim Al Thani facilitated the movement of these volunteers to Kuwait. But by the time they reached Syria, the war had ended.
قد وافقت الحكومة
The Kuwaiti government has approved establishing a military camp on the Kuwaiti land, and they provided uniforms and the military education, and these camps continued until 1980, and thousands of Palestinians graduated from these camps. There were a number of restrictions that were imposed upon on Palestinians. However, there were different forms of cooperations, like a person was in Bahrain. He said that the activities started from the 1965, and they had an issue with the British intelligence, who was in charge of the security apparatus in Bahrain, and so he was forced to meet Isa bin Salman al Khalifa, Sheikh and he had pictures of Palestinians who are to be deported on the premise that they are communists. So Al-Mashal explained the situation to a sheikh, and he took back his decision. And also Abu Jihad said that the Fatah chapter in Qatar was faced with different forms of harassment. However, they were embraced by different officials, among them Sheikh Shaim, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I will stop here. So, what I want to say that the instrumental role of this area and the liberation movement was huge, and it was mutual beneficial. So this support was not marginalized. However, these countries still play a very important role in supporting and expressing solidarity with Palestine through the different activities and rebuilding. So I hope that I shed some light on the role of the PLO in the area. Thank you very much, Yara, for this distinguished paper. The Cypra caused a problem to Dr. Shafiq Al-Ghabra in Kuwait. However, the judiciary system in Kuwait sided with Dr. Al-Ghabra, and I hope that there will be a detailed study about the transformation of the liberation movement in Kuwait after the liberation of Kuwait, because there are some studies who focused on some historical junctures. I would like to thank the panelists for their excellent remarks and presentations, and for the observation of time, adhering to time, which was noticeable. We will open the floor now to the audience and implore them to adhere to time. Apologies for any injustice towards the audience. Yaqub Al-Kandari from Kuwait. Thank you. You did not punish me or sanction me. I think the Kuwaiti culture could be totally different, because from the early stages it was supportive of the Palestinian question for two reasons, main reasons. The first one, at the official level, because the Kuwaiti government or state embraced the PLO and helped in establishing, and the civil structure of the Kuwaiti society. So, since the Nakba and the defeat of 1967 were very supportive, I was born after the 1967 war, not, and I can describe this culture because I was raised on the premise that Palestine was Arab and need to return to the 60. And I remember his words when he said, "When you grow up, what would you like to be?" I said, "Officer, military officer." Why? Because I want to take part in the liberation of Palestine. So it is a vivid memory, and he bought me a military uniform. I remember in my youth, but unfortunately, I disappointed him and did not. I became a doctor. So although the occupation, the Iraqi occupation of Kuwait, and despite the position, quote unquote, uh, the uh, the uh, the Kuwaiti position did not change even after the occupation. Sheikh Jabir said on TV, he said, if there is a country that would normalize relations with the Zionist entity, Kuwait will be the last. And also, the foreign minister spoke about the criminal Zionist entity. So, at the popular as well as the official levels, the position at the stand of Kuwait is very strong. And we all remember Sheikh Saad's position in 1970, in September of 1970. when he played a role in removing the head of the PLO, Yasser Arafat, who wore the Kuwaiti garment and was able to leave Jordan unharmed. Good afternoon, Hussam Said from Egypt. I have a historical, not political question. My question to Dr. Nasser and Dr. Saif: the role of the Palestinian refugees between 1940 and 1960. It was a point of contention between UK. He was the occupation power or the colonization power in Oman. So if you between 1949 and 1950, and there are literature that's published in the Library of Qatar. Secondly, to Dr. Riham, I had a question about the historical starting point. You're talking about 1920 as it is. So it was 1929, not 1920. So you mentioned Khalid al-Farad, poet. However, this is a concerning the date, it was in 1928, not 1929. So for a poet to compose a poem that this shows that he is aware of the Palestinian struggle, and we could go back to the Literature Club and Al Kuwait magazine 1924. My final question. You did not mention about the impact of the Palestinian work on in the Gulf, on especially when it comes to the relations between the Gulf countries and Jordan, which was a very controversial issue. Thank you for your presentations. I have two questions. The first question directed to Saif. My name is Saif al-Islam Eid from the Arab Center. The question about the Sultanate of Oman, you highlighted the historical support. However, there were exceptional events in 1996 and 2018 by hosting Israeli officials, mainly the Prime Minister Netanyahu. How do you explain these events? Was it part of the ongoing effort to normalize relations between Israel and Oman? Because this is an exception to the Omani position vis-a-vis the Palestinian question. My question to Yara: thank you very much for your presentation, and you have spoke about the foundation and establishment of many Palestinian movements in Kuwait and the Gulf regions. And what are the role of other countries who were involved in the foundation of the PLO, Egypt, for instance, who played an instrumental role in establishing the uh, Palestinian Liberation organizations. So the role of other countries when it comes to this issue. Yasmin Al-Masri, good afternoon. Uh, Thank you for all the panelists and Yara for your documentation offers. I The role of the Nasiri part at the early stages of the establishment, even though the Gulf countries were the cradle in which the PLO was established, not mentioning the role of the Nasserist component. It shows that it is both actions are isolated from each other. My question to Dr. Riham: why do you believe that the movement towards democracy is a logical result of the political movements? Thank you very much, the chair. Today, the majority of the panelists are women, so I'd like to congratulate my sisters and daughters, Yara and Riham. However, I have a comment, another question related to the Oman. So Kuwait until 1990, they have no other question or no other cause save the Palestinian cause in 1991 for a short period of time because of the internal and regional situation. So Kuwait, who was the beacon in the Gulf, was not to be like that without the involvement of the Arab, especially the Palestinian refugees. I know that the chair of this panel will. And I remember in the 50s and the 60s, pa- part of the price for the football tickets were dedicated to the Algerian Revolution and to the Palestinian also revolution, the Algerian and the Palestinian revolution. My question to our colleagues from Oman, you have opened our appetite towards the historical role of Oman in the Palestinian struggle. So my question is that is more contemporary than historical, so focus on the present. Oman is always known with its rationality and uh, reservations and conservatism. So how do you explain how do you explain the position of Oman in relation to the Gaza question? If we would classify the Gulf countries, Oman is as a that. Please give me more space. I okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nasser, Dr. Saif, Riham, and my dear colleague Yara. You open our appetite to, and I feel I have a sense of sorrow since we are when we speak about a past that is a source of pride and the current time that the sorrow and the so I think this is this session could or requires honoring some of the names that have been mentioned. And I second the question by my colleague when he said about the conservative position of Saudi, which is not evident, similar in comparison with the role of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar. So this is a recommendation. If we would have more involvement by Omani, and this is the first time I learn about the instrumental role of Oman throughout history. I remember I met some Omani colleagues in this center during my graduate studies. So we should more light on the role of Oman, and Oman currently in the genocide. It is the only country that opened residentship for Gazan people. And I remember when I visited Amman, Jordan, 2 months ago, they said we have changed the procedures and arrangements for the uh, people of Gaza, whereas Oman opened a wide the door widely open for the people of Gaza. My last question for Yara: the documentation is very important, and I don't think there is a dichotomy between the Gulf states and the Nasri role. The my my question is analyzing the current situation, do we still enjoy the an environment that is welcoming the Palestinian people, or the situation has changed and it could be counter to all these welcoming sentiments of the people?
الدكتورة ريهام.
Dr. Reham, I'm very happy with your paper, and also you mentioned Jassim and Sagar and the influence from Iraq. I don't know how you reached this conclusion. What was the impact of Iraq on the feelings of defending the Palestinian? Zubair, for example, with many people from Najd used to live, and it was a route for smuggling weapons to the Palestinian fighters. Ms. Yara said the Al Thani sheikhs had direct help of the Palestinians. What was the popular role in this? Thank you very much to all the panelists. I'm proud that there is a generation of researchers who have different approaches towards this very important cause. We need this all the time. My question to Saif and Nasser, through the documents that you have come to view, the the educational mission which was left by Bertrand Thomas, which came in that period, what stopped this educational mission to have the kind of influence to, for example, to turn into an organization similarly to what happened in Kuwait, for example, and other Gulf countries? Did the British have a hand in this? And also, Dr. Iham, the British hand was evident in Kuwait. Why did they ignore the Palestinian agitation and nationalist movement in Kuwait, but in Oman was Paris? One final word, please, Yara. Always the people in Gulf, especially after the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, that they do not deserve a different approach so far as the question of Palestine and the Gulf is concerned. Thank you. 1 minute. This is, I feel a lump in my throat. I'm not a politician, I'm not an expert in politics, I'm an expert in economy and administration. I would like to have heard about the future of the Palestinian cause. We talk about the past and we documented all what we heard for our generation, something we lived, and the Palestinian cause is at the center of attention and the conscience of every Arab and Muslim. So, will this remain within the context of the Arab League and the Arab nation or the Islamic nation? I wish you do not focus too much on the theory because your half minute is over. The problem is the Palestinian cause, it's with us, it's a reality. So what is its future? I was looking forward to hear something about the economic boycott and its impact, but we didn't hear. Nobody talked. But if I was given the opportunity, I would have talked about the economic aspect in in doing something in favor of the cause, the Palestinian cause. I wish that the researchers will talk less about what we gave and what we did. There was a lot. I shouldn't say I did and gave, because scientific research should be neutral. Of course, in the general talk between people is different, and in the view of the events, the situation doesn't merit talking too much on the past. We should focus on the future. Okay. I doubt it if there is anyone at all who does not support the Palestinian cause. This is our cause, all of us. Thank you very much. And now we have 5 minutes for each paper. Thank you very much. I will try to respond to all of them if I can. But regarding relationship between Arab countries and Jordan, uh, there is a section in the paper. I didn't have time to talk about it, but regarding the relations with Arab countries, there were many events, and there were events which led to some sort of a difficult patch, especially in so-called Black September in 1970, when the Jordanian regime attacked the Palestinian resistance. The civil society in Kuwait, they protested. They declared their support of the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people and called in the Khartoum Arab Summit, called for stopping all financial aid to Jordan and divert that to the PLO. So even at the popular level, the support movement continued. Not only about Jordan, the events in Lebanon, there was fear that the events in Lebanon will find their way and spill to Kuwait. But despite that, the press continued, and also after the establishment of the rejection front in Iraq, and Sheikh Abdullah recalled Salim al-Zanoun and Ali al-Hassan and al-Yasin, and when there was some movement of assassinations, he they feared that Abu Nidal would start a campaign of assassinations in Kuwait. But despite that, the support, even with the assassination of Ali Yassin in Kuwait in 1970, the role of Egypt, there is many accounts of the establishment of Fatah. Some contribute that to Egypt, but in Kuwait, 5% of the salaries of the Palestinians who work for the government and sometimes even for the private sector, this financial contribution would go to the PLO. Also, the impact of Egypt in the beginning was against the Fatah, but then later on the situation changed. The Al Thani sheikhs had a role, but at the popular level, there were many campaigns, and during the Intifada, there were a lot of donations and campaigns. Dr. Ali Khalifa al Kuwari, in his book entitled Al Awsaj, he documents that very well. I don't know what to say about about this level of support, or are the Gulf countries still welcoming to the Palestinians? I hope so. I think at the popular level at least. And the question is the Palestinian cause a Palestinian concern or a cause for the Arabs? I think maybe over 70% say that it's a cause for all Arabs. Thank you, Dr. Rihan. Regarding the date, the 1929, I think the reason why this poem was republished is what the Al-Buraq revolution in Palestine. Maybe it was republished in 1929 because it was the impact of an event that took place in Palestine. It was not just a reflection, it was for me the impact of that event and how events like that impact the behavior of certain people. So this is linked to the Al-Buraq revolution. As for the level of awareness, whether it's to do with democracy or not, I never said that, and I don't think it's correct also to say so. What I'm saying is the awareness level is a motive for people to utilize democratic means and tools to call for their and demand their freedoms, their rights. At the same time, there are duties, of course, but are they linked closely, linked to each other? That if number one comes, number two would follow? No, this is not accurate. As for the idea of Iraq and Zubair and the interaction between Iraq and Iraqis and the people of Kuwait, I think this is a very wide-ranging subject, and to discuss the impact of the people of Az-Zubair on the people of Kuwait, I view this from an academic, educational, and cultural point of view when we talk about newspapers, also the citizen bands, the CB radio station from Az-Zuhur Royal Palace in Iraq. And there is an anecdote which is worth mentioning on the impact of the people of Kuwait regarding in 1941 in the military coup attempt which took place in 1941, in May 1940. Qsabi, a member of the Qsabi, Saqar Ghanim al-Qsabi, who, who ordered building a dhow which was called Al-Rashid to commemorate the name of Rashid Ali al-Kailani. So he named this dhow or this ship after Rashid Ali al-Gailani. So the impact is huge. If I want to take that into consideration, there are clear evidence of that, Iraq's influence on the Kuwaiti awareness.
Concerning the political movements in Kuwait, so it was mainly focused on the individuals and the groups of Kuwaitis who would join the liberation movement. However, I've seen in some sources the attitudes and the inclination of the impact of the Palestinian teachers on the Kuwaiti students. And concerning the question related to the reason behind this activity, political activity, the head of the state, he was the Sheikh of Kuwait throughout these political periods, especially prior to the establishment of the parliament. So Kuwait was leading in supporting all causes, chiefly the Palestinian question. Final fast questions to our colleagues from Oman. I link your Hussam Said, and we need to read this paper in the historical context. Oman was enclosed, the political situation, there were political division, and even addressing external political aspects have in its minimal at the level of Muscat and Ghazwa entities. So there were no education, and the elites were very much engaged in the internal affairs, especially the colonization authority was present in Oman. At the beginning, it was like one of the prominent figures was speaking about the Palestinian cause, and he was questioned. When the action takes place, it could be read and from different angles, political, historical, or sociology. I don't believe in what's so-called the status quo, the present. So I read any action or activity or event in a quantum. So speaking about contemporary issues, maybe he heard Dr. Hatem al-Shamfari and al-Ghailani who spoke about this very issue. However, my perspective that is that in 1990s there were an outbreak, especially after the Madrid peace negotiations and the peace accord in Oslo. So more engagements took place. Now the situation is different. And Dr. Abdul Rida, the position of Oman is evident and clear at the official and the popular level vis-a-vis what's taking place in Gaza. Dr. Isra, I don't know, maybe we are not
لكن أيضا يمكن على الآخر نبغى أن يطلع يعني لأن هذا الموضوع نحن
we are not very active in portraying the current Omani position, or however we need to take into account the presence of Oman in eastern Africa. It was very advanced. There were the Sultani print, and there were magazines and newspapers. The Omani were very active in Zanzibar or Uganda, and so they were contacting with the magazines and newspapers in the Levant and in Egypt, and through which they expressed their political opinions. We do thank the audience. We will take 10 minutes break before the